Rain hammered the glass walls of the Manhattan Civil Courthouse as Serafina Cross stood alone in the dim hallway. Her coat soaked, her breath unsteady. Moments earlier, Dominic Calloway had leaned in with a smirk sharp enough to cut skin. "Sign it, Sarah. You leave with nothing," he whispered, his voice low and cruel, as if the marriage he'd just destroyed were an inconvenience he needed to finish before dinner. A bailiff passed by, glancing at her pityingly, as though she were already a discarded woman in a city built to crush the powerless. Serafina didn't speak. She simply lifted her eyes, and for the first time Dominic flinched. Something in her silence was wrong, dangerous, out of place. She signed the papers anyway. Then she set the pen down and murmured, "Dominic, did you ever read the lease?" He scoffed, waving her off like noise in the background. But in courtroom 4B, when the judge read her full name aloud, the air shifted, sharp, electric, stunned. Because Serafina Cross wasn't who he thought she was. And the moment her real identity surfaced, the courtroom stopped breathing. What happens next will decide who truly owns everything. Like the video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. You won't want to miss what follows. The storm outside the courthouse hadn't eased by the time Serafina stepped into the street, but the city's noise followed her like an echo that refused to let the moment fade. She walked past the yellow cabs splashing through puddles, past the vendors covering their carts with plastic sheets, past the strangers who never once looked up. Her heels clicked in a steady rhythm, but each step carried the weight of a decision she hadn't said aloud yet. Behind her, Dominic was still smirking in the hallway, certain he had reduced her life to a single signature. She lifted her face to the rain, letting the cold wash the last trace of him off her skin. She had played her part for years, softening her voice, hiding her lineage, hiding the ring that symbolized more than wealth. It symbolized a dynasty older than the skyscrapers surrounding her. Tonight that mask finally cracked. At the curb, a black sedan rolled forward. The rear door opened before she touched the handle. Garrison Ford didn't waste time with greetings. "You lasted longer than I expected," he said, not unkindly. She slid into the seat, water dripping from her coat. "He thought I was nothing," Serafina answered, "and I needed to see exactly how far he would go once he believed that." Garrison studied her face carefully. "And now that you know—" "Now," she said, wiping a strand of wet hair from her cheek, "we end the illusion." The sedan pulled into traffic, weaving through Manhattan like a silent predator. Every city light reflected off the tinted windows, coloring her thoughts in silver and gold. She remembered the nights she had cooked Dominic dinner after his meetings, the way he used to thank her before the arrogance bloomed. He had once held her hand as if she were the anchor to his ambition. But the moment his startup gained traction, the warmth in his eyes cooled into entitlement. In the car, she opened her small metal box. Inside, the blackwood signet ring glimmered beneath the dim overhead light. For years she kept it hidden, protecting him from the truth he never deserved. She slipped it on slowly, feeling its weight settle on her finger like an oath. Back at the penthouse, Dominic was pacing. The smart system ignored him, the thermostat mocked him, and the lights flickered in deliberate defiance. "It's a glitch," he muttered. "Just a stupid glitch." But the building felt unfamiliar, colder, as if it already knew whom it belonged to. Bianca perched on the sofa wrapped in a designer blanket, huffing whenever the temperature dropped another degree. "Dominic, fix it," she snapped. "Do I look like IT support?" he shot back, pushing button after button on the control panel. But the only response he got was the Hawk and Key emblem flashing on the screen, a symbol he had never bothered to ask about when he bought the penthouse through a shell company he didn't realize wasn't actually his. The following morning, as the wind howled through gaps in the windows left open by the system, Dominic's phone buzzed non-stop. His CFO stammered about frozen accounts. His lawyer mumbled excuses. His assistant quit via text. The world wasn't collapsing. It had already collapsed, and he was discovering it in real time. At the courthouse the next day, he strutted inside as if the city still bowed to him. But when he saw Serafina seated calmly at the defense table, with Garrison Ford arriving moments later, The arrogance on his face cracked like thin ice. Judge Miller's gavel struck. The proceedings began like a storm breaking open. Dominic's attorney threw accusations like darts, painting Serafina as a parasite. Each word was met with her steady gaze, a silence sharper than argument. "You contributed nothing," Arthur insisted. "My client built an empire alone." "And who funded his empire?" Garrison asked. The room stiffened. Even the air seemed to draw back in anticipation. Then the blue velvet-bound documents were presented. Contracts, ledgers, ownership details. Every page a blade slicing through Dominic's narrative. When the judge asked for the beneficial owner of Chimera Holdings, the entire courtroom leaned in. "The sole proprietor," Garrison announced, "is Serafina Juliet Blackwood." A shift ran through the room, a collective inhale, the thud of reality slamming into place. Dominic's face drained. His lips parted, but nothing emerged except pure disbelief. "You didn't even know her name," Garrison said quietly. The acceleration clause was read aloud. The debt total was revealed. The seizure order was confirmed. Dominic stumbled back as if the bench itself had pushed him. He whispered, "$55 million. "I can't." "You can't," Garrison echoed. "And now you won't." Serafina only stood when the judge dismissed the case with prejudice. Her heels made a soft, deliberate sound against the polished floor as she walked out. Dominic chased after her, gasping for breath. "Sarah." "Wait, listen, I was stressed. It was the company. You don't understand what pressure does to a man." "You stop. Turn." Her voice remained calm. "You were cruel long before you were pressured." He reached for her arm as desperation twisted his features. "Please don't do this." "You already did," she said, stepping away. Outside the courtroom, flashbulbs erupted. Journalists surged. Dominic shielded his face while reporters shouted questions about bankruptcy and fraud. Serafina entered the private elevator without a glance back, leaving him drowning in the very attention he once craved. Hours later, security escorted him out of his former headquarters. His keycard beeped red. His nameplate was gone. Employees whispered but didn't intervene. Corporate loyalty evaporates quickly when the kingdom falls. And fall he did. Bianca abandoned him as soon as the credit card stopped working. His friends stopped answering messages. He found himself in a motel where the walls smelled like bleach and the carpet sank like wet bread beneath his feet. But humiliation only deepened when the gala night arrived. He squeezed into a wrinkled tux, telling himself he deserved to reclaim a moment of dignity. The plaza glowed with chandeliers, violins, and whispers of influence, but when he stepped inside, no one looked in his direction. The screens flashed the Blackwood crest. Serafina took the stage. The applause was overwhelming. Her speech dismantled him with elegance sharper than any blade. And when the footage appeared, the security audio of his cruelty, his arrogance, his dismissal of her humanity, the audience's gasp rippled like a wave. Dominic froze beneath the spotlight of shame. A guard approached. "Sir, you need to leave." The ballroom doors closed behind him with a sound that felt final. 6 months later he was parking cars, a job where no one called him visionary, where his name meant nothing. And on a frigid night, when a Rolls-Royce Phantom stopped in front of him and Serafina stepped out, radiant and unshakable, his final humiliation arrived with quiet precision. She handed him a tip. $100. The last echo of their history, given without malice, without emotion, without need. And as she walked away with James at her side, Dominic realized this wasn't revenge. This was justice. This was the universe returning exactly what he had put into it. The valet stand lights flickered above him as he stared at the bill in his hand, the weight of his downfall settling across his shoulders. He had mocked her. He had erased her. He had believed he owned everything around him. Now he owned nothing. Not his company, not his home, not even the dignity he once wore like armor. And the city, relentless and indifferent, kept moving around him as if he were already forgotten. But Serafina. She had rebuilt her life from the ashes of his cruelty, and now ruled the empire he once worshipped. The last thing he saw that night as he stepped into the garage was the Blackwood crest glowing on the dashboard screen, a final reminder of the truth he'd ignored. He had tried to destroy a woman who had been holding the keys to his world all along. And now she held the keys to his end. What happens when he tries to crawl back into the world he burned? That answer comes next. The night outside the restaurant had settled into a quiet shimmer when Serafina stepped through the doors with James beside her, the warmth of their laughter drifting into the cold. She didn't look back at the valet stand, not because she wished to forget the past, but because she had finally outgrown the version of herself that once begged for someone else's approval. The woman who had carried years of silence and compromise had learned something far more powerful than revenge. She had learned how to reclaim her own voice. Inside the car, James squeezed her hand gently. "You did what few people ever manage," he said. "You walked away stronger." She didn't answer right away. She watched the street fade behind them, the city lights bouncing off the windshield like fragments of old memories losing their sharpness. For the first time in years, she felt light, unburdened, certain she hadn't risen to destroy someone. She had risen to rebuild herself. As the sedan turned onto Fifth Avenue, a new chapter unfolded in front of her. Not as a shadow in someone's story, but as the author of her own. And somewhere behind them, a lone figure in a worn maroon coat watched the taillights disappear, realizing too late that truth has a way of returning. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales to help the channel grow. More powerful stories await you.